In part 1, we spoke about OS security or the lack of it, and this time we're going to be doing the same with TCP/IP. We're going to be talking a little bit about telcos because that has to do with the history of what things are the way they are today. So, in the early days when telephony was beginning to take shape, at&T, the US, was granted two things. One is a monopoly, and that means the only people that could bring telephony services were the folks on at&T, and they were granted a monopoly because of the large investment that they have to do in deploying all those wires. Remember, every phone was connected to a set of twisted pairs, and twisted is because they were twisted to avoid noise in it, and that was very costly. It was very costly then, and it is very costly today. But the other thing that they were given in order to operate successfully was a bunch of federal laws that basically made a federal crime to intercept a phone call without a proper warrant, so nobody can actually intercept the phone. And they did that because very early on they realized that all these wires going into all those cabinets and all those stuff were not hard to be, to put another receptor on one of those lines and listen to the conversation and record the conversations. And so they were actually, and you'll see what I'm going into, what does this have to do with internet security in a second, but they were given those laws to protect that. Well, as a consequence of that, all those phone lines were assumed, and they were going first with voice. But remember that those very same wires, because those were the ones that were there, were actually also used for data in the beginning, right? That concept of modem is actually a modulator, the modulator, because those twisted pair carry no modulation. It was baseband type of transmission of the voice. So those phone lines were assumed to be trusted. I'm not going to worry about the security of those because I got federal laws that actually protect us for that. And we'll see how that permeates into many things. For example, we even suffer from that today, caller ID. You can get a phone call from somebody in your phone and show caller ID, and it may pretend to be your wife and it's somebody else, right? That is what is called spoofable. It can be mess around. And actually that permeates today into SMS. SMS is very very insecure precisely for the same reason, because they inherit that concept from telephony, from the telcos, assuming that those things were trusted. Well, in the beginning, data transmission using those wires to send, for banks, from branches on a bank to talk to the central place and give you your balance and stuff like that, was what is called point-to-point. It was a set of wires that go from that branch to the hub, the controller for that particular company. You remember numbers like the 3705 in the IBM lingos, 3725, 3745. Those every branch was connected to that. So they were dedicated wires. And again, that carries a sense of security. I mean, that line is not messed out. It's under the control of the telco, and there's still federal laws that protects them. And those were the days of IBM's SNA. They were the kings of the networking world. But then something came that was very disruptive. Packet switching. A very innovative concept. We take it for granted today, but it was very innovative in the beginning. So instead of being point-to-point, it's any-to-any. I mean, everybody will share the same wire, the same communication media, and the data will be separated into small packets, and they will all travel together, and they will be depacketized on the other end and put back together. So the infrastructure is assumed to be shared. And universities begin to, where the internet started with the DARPA project, they begin to, oh, let's connect university this with university that, and we can do research on this, research on that. So security, I mean, who's going to mess with that? We don't care. And these things, I mean, no one ever foresaw the importance of what this will be taking. So as a consequence of that, in TCP/IP, there's no native encryption either. The same thing that we suffer on the operating system that we analyze in part 1, same thing happening here. Remember that it was Netscape, when they came with the browser and they realized that if you want to do serious things, you need to do good encryption, that they came out with SSL version 1, and that was not very good, and then evolved 1.2 and so on. But again, we get back to the ugly bolted-in security. Right? You can have HTTP or HTTPS, right? But I mean, it would have been different if the fathers of the internet would have embedded this and say, well, no, everything has to be encrypted, everything has to be secure from the very beginning. There's also, and this affects us, most of the people watching this channel, there was not the concept of native security monitoring. All those things were afterthoughts. Things like Wireshark, SIMs themselves, packet capture, all those things were, you know, again, things that were added. And therefore, they were added, and you needed to add it if you want to monitor, and also they can be bypassed, and they can be, they can allow the unauthorized people to see it. Think for a moment, even today, things that we do, everything we do on the UDP is spoofable. There's no handshake when you do a UDP session, so you can spoof an IP on the UDP. If you think for a moment, things like firewall, encryption appliances, what else can we think of? Proxy logs, right? Proxy servers, IPSs. They are like agents in the operating system discussion that we had before. They are afterthought. Oops, I forgot to do this. Let me actually put it as an extra thing and actually, you know, sell it and make a profit on it. Right? But that keeps adding to the cost. That's like, you know, that house that is insecure, and I'm putting the bars on the windows and getting my vicious dog and getting a gun and doing all these things because I need to make it secure, because it is, I don't live in a secure neighborhood. But one big difference that exists between TCP/IP and the OSs is that here there is no alternative. We are stuck with it, and it's unthinkable to change it. I mean, to redesign and come up with a new internet. That cannot be done. That stuff is like, you know, getting a secure Windows. That stuff cannot be done. I mean, it's impractical to think about that. Just think on the sheer amount of code that has been produced and created there. And also, where the economic incentives are, they are not there for people to do that. Think for a moment that you and I have at home IoT devices, TVs, refrigerators, cameras, sprinklers, alarms. Some of them have vulnerabilities in the full TCP/IP stack they have, and those things will never be patched. You sure that all the printers that you have the current version? Just the printer alone. Okay? What about, you know, a cheap device I attached to solve a problem on IoT and I never updated it? Well, that can be used to attack you, because we know that that's the Mirai attack. The Mirai botnet was actually an example of that. And by the way, I have done a separate series of videos that show how you can mitigate this situation at home using, you know, pfSense and the free Curate ACE and some things to monitor stuff at home and learn a lot of cybersecurity on it. But security today, guys, you will agree with me that it is an arms race. The good thing is an arms race between the bad guys and the hackers. The hackers are the bad guys and the good guys. Let me put it that way. The law obedience citizens. But this is serious stuff, and I'm not gonna. The third video, if I created it, I'm not gonna make it public because it can be very controversial. Because this can become an arms race between countries. Remember how important were the efforts that the British did in breaking the encryption that the Germans had with the Enigma machine that helps them and save a lot of lives and helps defeat the Nazis. Because the US was able to decrypt the cryptography that the Japanese embassy used. Things like the successful Battle of Midway took place. There are lots of stories in which cryptography has played a big role into the security. But again, I was thinking of doing a third video on countries, but I think that's going to be way too controversial. The good news for you guys that are listening to this is that you probably have seen me saying security jobs have a lot of job security. There's going to be, as long as you keep your skills up to date and you keep on learning on this arms race, there's going to be job for you, because this thing doesn't have a solution that we can actually foresee right now.